Wow, that never gets old. When people write music for, when people like give up their hard written music for you, it never gets old. Welcome to Generation Movie on a Wednesday night. Thank you everybody that's joining us. We're super happy to be here. Got a good movie tonight. It's a cult. It is the very definition of a cult film. Wouldn't you agree, Rich? Like, it's one of those movies that you either like or you don't like, and you're in or you're not in, right? There's no in between on Tron, which is our movie of the night.
Programs, you are absolutely correct.
If
you buy into this world, you're there. If not, nothing's gonna help you. Sorry.
Yeah, you have an hour and a half of pure desolation. It's at an hour and 36 minutes. It's short. Of all the movies we've done on the show, it's one of the shortest movies we've done thus far. It's only an hour and 36 minutes, and I think it's because they just didn't know what the hell they were doing. And thank God for it. It's one of those movies that's it's way more embedded in our psyche, subtly in our movie psyche. It's like it's kind of hidden there. It's kind of sitting there. And it's inspired a great many things. We'll talk about that later, of course. But it is one of those movies that is a cult film. It is a movie that it's a Disney movie that Disney virtually had nothing to do with.
It's the first Disney movie, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's the first Disney movie to imply that two characters who are not married are sleeping together.
Well, are any of the animals from Bambi married?
Well,
sleeping together? Yeah, I'm just saying.
Two human characters.
Two human characters. This is a pretty big divide. Okay, but we're gonna get to it. It does a lot of things, actually. It has a lot of firsts. It has a lot of wonky little things that we're going to discuss. But we do have to get the particulars out of the way, right? The important parts of the show that, of course, if you like our show and you like other people that are like Rich and I, who love movies and just get aboard and have like kind of a pioneering spirit that Rich and I have. I feel like Rich and I are very rugged individualists who are very much, born and bred in theaters. If you like the content, we have our YouTube channel on the Indie Escape Network, youtube.com at the Indie Escape Network. A lot of backslashes and C's and stuff. But we have our own YouTube channel, which has a lot of great content almost every night of the week. We're working on it. And then we also have the wonderful Facebook page, Indie Escape on the Facebook. That sounds like somebody who's like 80. Is it on the Facebook? Yes, the Indie Escape Network is on Facebook, just on Facebook. And you can find us at these great places, which is, https, www.facebook.com, Indie Escape. A lot of great people on the network. Super happy that Joe Ridgely and company are having us come in and kind of like piece through movie history on a weekly basis, which is fun, and good for us. But this movie, Rich,
Oof.
this movie's it's interesting. Like, we're talking about the Cult of Tron, because there is a Cult of Tron. There is people who dress up the characters. There are people who have, we have all these things. But the Cult of Tron it's got to start at the beginning, right? It's got to start with everything.
Steve Weisberger.
Yes, production. Steve Weisberger. That's where it begins, right? Beginning is always production for us. We always look at how things started, how things got going, and how it all began.
Now, I want. Did you want to go into?
No, I was just gonna where it all began, and if you have something to jump off, you go right ahead, because I think it's one of the. Not only is it one of the shortest movies we've done, it's a very specific. The pre-production on this movie is like, it's like people hanging out in Silicon Valley type stuff. It's weird in that all the pieces that kind of fit together for weird reasons. So whatever you got to start with is a perfect place to start.
Well, I wanted to start kind of actually with a little bit of a brag that even though he was born in New York, Steve Weisberger grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania. He grew up in Hazleton, which is just about 20 minutes south of Wilkes-Barre.
Everything is about 20 minutes away in Scranton. and Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton's 20 minutes away, Wilkes-Barre's 20 minutes away. Everything. Yeah. So yeah, but that's not a bad brag. That's an interesting brag, because it's one of those movies that's kind of its own entity.
He would have been a teenager, 15, 16 years old, somewhere around there, when Sean Connery blew through town when they were shooting the Molly Maguires right nearby, the Martin Ritt movie. And so I'm wondering if, and I've never seen him address this in an interview, but then again, I've barely seen any interviews with the guy. If maybe something like that is kind of what sparked an interest in filmmaking in general. Just,
Well, so you brought up, we're going to digress for a moment here. Not that we're not going to talk about Tron the entire time, but you mentioned Martin Ritt, and I'm going to bring it up on the second show. I have two shows. I have Loud and Nerdy, which is sort of my flat. Like, this is a show on a different network, and Loud and Nerdy is my home show. But I was talking about it tonight. Martin Ritt is a major component player of The Last Movie Stars, which is an Ethan Hawke HBO Max production right now, a documentary about Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, which I am knee deep in. If you are a movie fan, if you're an acting fan, if you like anything about movies, you have to watch the documentary. It's fascinating stuff. But Martin Ritt is a key player. Martin Ritt directed a lot of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward movies, and he was great friends with them. There are videos in the documentary of him playing with their kids. So you did the tangent for me. It's perfect. I'm trying to watch one new Paul Newman or Joanne Woodward movie a day.
Whoa, a day. That's some dedication, my friend.
I'm 3 days in. I don't know how long it's going to last. They just have movies I haven't seen, but I'm probably going to end up doing movies I have seen, like classics. But I watched The Long Hot Summer, Sweet Bird of Youth, and I watched Paris Blues today, which I had never seen. The Paris Blues thing blew me away because it was Dizzy Gillespie and Sidney Poitier and Paul Newman all really blowing horns for a 10-minute sequence during that movie. And I think it's also directed by Martin Ritt. So it's this weird thing that you drew out of me tonight. But I'm very much obsessed with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward right now. It's like you get into for folks who watch the show, you don't know me that well, but Rich knows me. When you get in the weeds on an actor and you just start like consuming as much of the actor as you can. I'm in that place right now, and all the stuff I've consumed thus far is phenomenal. Like, who knew Rip Torn was young? Like,
and had hair.
And was kind of an asshole in the movie. Like, it was like, because Rip Torn's always the cool character in everything we've seen him in. So he's a terrible person in Sweet Bird of Youth. Absolutely terrible, terrible character. And he was young, and I was shocked by it, but I was like, it was made in the 50s. So I shouldn't have been shocked by it, but I was, because that's a young Rip Torn. I've never seen that. But it's a fascinating documentary. We'll get back to Tron. I'm sorry. Just a little bit thing to get us off the beaten path. I'm sorry about that.
But Steve Lisberg went to school in both Pottstown, and then it was where's that note I made? Tufts University. So
we have some intros now that I've completely derailed our progress. Joe says, "Good evening, gentlemen. Hope you're feeling better." I am feeling better. Good evening from Ken McKernan. Ken McKernan was the person who was going to give it a shot, and of course he wrote, "It's visually stunning. I still can't stand it." I'm sorry. You're either in or you're not. The visually stunning part, it is one of the most visually stunning movies ever made. Gabe says, "Good day, mates." No puns, Gabe. No puns. And you had me at City Portia. Yeah, super, Paris Blues was fantastic. Like, Paris Blues, it's Portier and Paul Newman, and it's about these two people who are visiting Paris, and they run into these two jazz guys, and Dizzy Gillespie's in it. Duke Ellington did the score, and it's just I don't know, forget it. I feel like it's a blind spot, and now I'm like embarrassing myself. Anyway, moving on. So Tron. Lisberger, I think you're right. The interesting thing about Lisberger is he is not the story side things, like he's a director and a writer, but he is not necessarily a filmmaker. Like, the fascinating thing is that Tron actually springs out of Palm, right? He was obsessed with video games and like original Atari, things like that. And he basically, set up his own animation studio. They created, I think it's Donald Kushner who created an animation studio with the intention of making Tron an animated film. And they basically created this 30-second animation feature that basically had the first time Tron is ever on screen. And basically it gets seen by various studios that all reject it. But Disney sees it and sees potential and says, we'll take it right now we're making The Fox and the Hound, and we're making The Rescuers Down Under, The Rescuers, and we're kind of in a boring phase of Disney. Here's the thing. It's a portion of Disney World and Disney life and movies where they weren't dominating. It's one of the rare instances where Disney isn't at the forefront of box office receipts. So they take a chance on this crazy Lisberger guy. And I saw 30
admit, though, at this time, Disney was kind of like doing some funky things. I mean, they tried doing
Black Cauldron and
Black Cauldron, the Black Hole. They were kind of casting around, trying to reinvent themselves in certain ways in reaction to Star Wars, basically. And
in reaction to Star Wars and the fact that their stuff wasn't hitting like it used to. Like Fox and the Hound, not a big hit. Rescuers, not big hits. Like, they were good. Like, they did well, but they're not like they're canon now. They're movies that everybody loves now, but they're Disney movies you watched late, right? I mean, if you have a kid starting on Disney, you're not going to start with The Fox and the Hound or The Rescuers, right? That it's after they've seen a bunch of other Disney movies.
But those movies came out after Star Wars. So I would argue that Star Wars changed the dynamic that the public expected out of their films. And because Fox and the Hound was kind of, in production before that change happened, before they could really adjust to it, it's what we wound up with. And in terms of
a veritable, what they would use the term is paradigm shift, Rich.
Yes, and it was a little too late to catch up with everything.
Right, and so you have all these other movies. You have Black Hole, which is, again, is not a usual Disney film. It's very violent. It's kind of dark. It has murderous robots. It's so Disney's in a weird place. Their live action things are kind of like, they've been very successful, but also not recently. And then this guy comes in with this 30-second pitch meeting I watched the pitch, Rich. It's not like there's nothing to it. It's basically, it looks like a weird Star Wars, like somebody doing a Star Wars thing in their backyard, right? Like where they've been captured by the Empire kind of thing. And I can see where they might get it, but you know, they finance it and they agreed to distribute, and they basically come up with a concept that they're going to do backlit animation, which is not fully animated, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. But it ends up becoming, it gets well received critically. It gets it becomes groundbreaking. It does all these things. It receives Oscar nominations,
but not for visual effects.
Not for visual effects, which is hilarious. Yeah, it's one of the most interesting created worlds on film ever. And so,
but we'll get to some of that in Legacy.
Yeah, that's the Legacy portion. So it starts out. There's a lot of computer background on this movie as well. Like when you're reading through and doing the study on production, Lisberger isn't a filmmaker. He is basically a guy that really loves computers, and he's fascinated with video games, and he sees the idea of meshing the two, right? Because if you look at it, most of the Tron stuff is right out of Pong, right? I mean, it's Pong-ish, right?
Basic video games, yeah, like the Rings game, with the highlight scoops. Light Cycles seems like a very basic kind of a game. It's just building a wall. It's kind of like when you do that grid and you and your friend each draw a line, you're trying to get squares.
Yeah, it's very much like that. Well, the games are basic, but that was one of the greatest arcade games ever put. Like one of the things that comes up as we're in production, but we're going to talk about it. The Legacy is the merchandise and the stuff that came out of Tron is in some ways more incredible than the reaction to the film, but we'll get there. So I think one of the most fascinating aspects of this production is they desperately needed Disney's help on things. And so what they eventually can come up with is the concept they're going to do an animated film that is bracketed by live action sequences, which they get a cast. They have a good cast actually for the time, right? They have Jeff Bridges and Bruce Boxleitner who is kind of like right there on the cusp of stardom. They have David Warner, may he rest in peace. We lost David Warner this week, actually, when we're filming. Like, it was very kind of bittersweet that we're doing Tron this week. For one of the greatest character actor movie villains. Like, he's so many movie villains and so good at every one of them and takes every single role super seriously and is amazing in almost everything he's in. There's never really roles where you go, David Warner's phoning it in. And the three that I mentioned in talking about him this week, he's fantastic in Time After Time, plays Jack the Ripper, which is a time travel movie, which is I saw it early as a child, and I think it's one of the reasons I love time travel movies to this day. Just getting the concepts right. Plays Jack the Ripper who steals H.G. Wells' time machine. Fantastic. It kind of becomes a treatise on violence in the 20th century. He's fantastic in Time Bandits. He plays pure evil. And in this, he plays a character named Sark. He is a person that's within the grid, which is where we're dealing with this film. And so the cast comes together. They go to Disney for help, Rich. And how about the fact that even though they're spending $10 to $12 million on this, nobody from Disney Animation will help. The Tron people, Lisberger and his staff and everybody comes in, and they're working this movie. They're trying to figuring out how they're going to make it. They ask for help from various people within the Disney Animation Studios, and they get nothing. They get zip. And it's just an incredible. It's an incredible thing when you come in and you're trying to work with somebody and they don't want to work with you, right?
I think it was just because they were outsiders, and all through its history, Disney was very closed shop in terms of its animators, which is
circle the
even
wagons and promote everybody.
Yeah, which is why even when the animators went on strike back in the, I want to say the late 40s, early 50s, I apologize for not having that date right. It was ugly, and it felt like a real betrayal to Walt because allegedly, you know, he always thought everybody was family, and that, you know, that family feeling can sometimes turn, instead of being like an embracing inwards of a group of people, it can be about pushing people away too, which I think is what happened when Lisberger showed up with his concept here, and they were just like, "Nah, we're good, thanks."
So you read about the production. It's interesting. It's a first-time writer, director, right? He comes in. It's not a lot of trouble though. Like it's one, except for fighting and figuring out how to do the movie, how to, you know, they had various futurists that they hired that actually eventually got focused into singular avenues. So they had, you know, they had Sid Mead, who had also worked on Blade Runner. They had, they had Peter Lloyd, right, who was a commercial artist, right, and designed environments, and they also had Jean Giraud, right, known as Morbius, right, from
Yes,
not in Morbin time, just Morbius, and
this movie
basically,
just drips his influence. It's ridiculous. If you ever like spent time reading his stuff in heavy metal, you know, through the 80s,
yeah,
you'll recognize
it
all
definitely
sorts of
has that. And they basically, they, with the computer animation sequences, they fix it, find a way to, they hire all of the computer graphics firms of the day, the top four, basically, Super Family F1, Super Foonly F1. They had Magi of Elmsford, New York, Robert Abel and Associates of California, Digital Effects in New York City. Bill Kovacs also worked on the film for Robert Abel, doing Wavefront Technologies. And it was all a collaboration. Everybody's working together. And then they get to Disney, and again, they run into a brick wall, right? Because they're working on making a movie that's basically bookend. It's got live action sequences on the outside, animation on the inside, but they can't make it fully animated because the computer graphics are not advanced enough to handle everything that they want to do. So you look at it and you go, wow, how, why, you know, how are we gonna do that? How are we gonna be able to do anything like that where we actually can't do any of the computer generation we have? So they come up with the idea. They come up with basically we're gonna production wise we're essentially gonna MacGyver it, right? We're gonna do backlit. They can't figure out how to do white, so it eventually becomes everything's backlit and it's black, so that the outfits pop when they decide to saturate color through them, and they mess up because they can't decide on the color. So it's originally going to be yellow that's good guys and blue that's bad guys, and eventually becomes blue good guys, red bad guys. But there's a mix throughout the movie. It's kind of messy. Like there are bad guys that have orange, there are bad guys that have blue, there are also bad guys that are red, and then there are good guys that are red and blue. And so it's all over the place. They get it right, but it's not clean.
And that color coding, that blue-red color coding, is also, again, pretty much a influence on from Star Wars. You know, blue lightsaber that Obi-Wan Kenobi has, blue lightsaber that he gives to Luke, red lightsaber that Darth Vader has.
Red is bad.
It's so simple. Yeah, red's a color of bad guys.
One of the things that comes across, because they can't do the computer animation the way they want to, they actually have to encode scenes and take giant pictures of them on a computer using a giant Kodak film that they had to bring in that was bigger than anything else. The workload on this, each frame of the movie took somewhere upwards of 6 hours to produce. For example, like the solar sailing moments where the giant ship is moving through like a canyon or metal or whatever it's moving through. each frame of that particular sequence took 6 hours to make a frame. So a
24
click,
frames a second.
24 frames a second, single frame taken 6. That's a lot of computer animation, but it's also the kind of thing where it's a lot of work. And it's just one of those things where you look at it and you go, Disney signing off on it, first time writer director. He has it goes from being what he thought it was going to be, which is real easy live action shoot, then animated in the middle, right? But because he was so enamored with CGI and because he was so enamored with computer graphics, he can't get past that. That's how he wants the movie to look. So we get, and it's not the first time CGI is going to be used. And it's not the first, like it doesn't have, it's the first time it's incorporated as a play element, and it's the first time it's incorporated as part of the storyline, right? The first time video games are kind of taken seriously in Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
There'd be so many failures after, and in many ways, Tron could be viewed as one of the successful video game adaptations, even though it's not an adaptation. It is an adaptation of a video game in the sense of that it was playing on Pong. But it's one of those movies where there's a lot of work that went into it, and they kind of the script kind of is clunky, right? The script work, it's written by one, it's clunky. And they do a lot of work on. They were so busy. Part of it is that they were so busy trying to figure out how to shoot it and get it to where they could release it and make it good, that they basically kind of okay, we just need these 2 parts of work, and then we can mumbo jumbo it the rest of the way. And that's one of the criticisms that we're going to talk about too, right? Where it's a lot of work to get through it.
Yeah, some critics were very much this is incomprehensible. But as I was watching it again, today, I was thinking about that criticism in particular, and I'm like, this movie is throwing a lot of computer jargon out in 1982. A lot of jargon that people probably don't know. I mean, we very much understand, input, output, things like that, a gaming grid, a server,
users.
A master program, users, all that. There's a lot of, lore or jargon in here that we just take for granted these days. But back in 1982, where everybody was like a computer.
There's no Apple. Yeah, there's no Apple computer yet. There's no, and there's
no real home computer,
right, at all. And all of the they can't even get the reason they have to backlight it and they have to shoot it and backlight it and do an animated style that's a little bit different than anything else is because when they go to the big computers in the world at the time, none of them can handle the amount of equations it would take to fully render the background.
It would take another 2 years of computer advancement before they could do full scenes the way they did in Last Starfighter in 1984.
Right, and then they fully realized they
were using one of the largest computers in the world, the Cray.
Right, and so you have this interesting production where you have a first time director. Although you don't nothing you read about it, everybody had a good time on the set. You have actors. We talked about David Warner, who's one of the great villain character actors of all time. He did talk about Tron in a lot of interviews where he basically said, "I didn't know what the hell was going on. I just knew it was a bad guy. I was red. I knew what I was supposed to do. I knew I was supposed to be a problem for Jeff Bridges. I showed up every day, and I tried to be that problem. And that's what it is. It's a good versus evil movie, and they put it onto this. But the process was so difficult. Kodak inventing its different film so they could do what they wanted to do. It's almost unheard of. And Disney kind of just throwing money down a hole because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know how it's going to open. They don't know anything about anything. And the movie opens on, last thing. I think one of the more interesting things is they create all these things. Music is also created. The music of this movie becomes the basis for a lot of synthesizer stuff after, right? It becomes a whole almost subgenre, so much so that something like Daft Punk is one of the most popular bands in the world, I think, still today. I mean, I know we're old, but they're not doing music anymore, but they're still very popular. Their whole gist is based on Tron, so much so that they're invited to do the music for Tron 2, which is Tron Legacy. So they had electronic musician Wendy Carlos. She is famous for one album, switched on Bach, and she did A Clockwork Orange, she did The Shining. So it's her first collaboration between her and Anne Marie Franklin. They do Mood synthesizer, Kruma digital synthesizer. They do a lot of synthesized music, and it just becomes enmeshed and ingrained, and it works. It like the music for the movie works remarkably well when you rewatch it. And the film opens on July 9th, 1982. Let me change over at banners. It opens on July 9th, 1982. And it's Rich, how would you say it? Does okay? Like it's a meh. It's it does okay. What did I do? Did I knock you out?
I think you did.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
No, you did not. Something happened. I think it might have been with StreamYard, because I was sitting here. I didn't have my hands on anything, and suddenly I go, boom, I got a white screen, and I had to reload.
Well, you're back. Okay, you're back. You're back. I'm sorry.
I wanted to touch on one thing about Wendy Carlos. Her album, Switched on Bach, is considered one of the pioneering pieces of electronica music. She was like one of the founders of who have popularized it, back in the 70s. So the fact that she was kind of, already thought of in the public's mind a bit as somebody who composes electronically, makes her a perfect fit for this project. The way this movie is foundational to computer generated visual effects and people understanding what a computer is in a certain ways. She's very much foundational for electronic computerized music. So
that's definitely your forte, not mine. So, but no, like I said, I was reading up on her, and like, when you hear she did Clockwork Orange, The Shining, she was working with Kubrick kind of extensively, because Kubrick was getting into that edgy kind of like whatever he's going to do, kind of, where he's doing different things. And so a couple comments. Let's see. Jerry writes, there was a Tron helmet display when I went to Disney. It's the only older Disney item I found there. Yeah, they're getting ready to open a Tron ride, so there'll be a lot of Disney items. They're going to be Troned out, I think. Also, this nugget came out this week, and talking about David Warner, Jerry writes, I never knew David Warner's original thought for Freddy. He was great in Time After Time. There was talk that Wes Craven, one of the stories that was going around during David Warner's passing, although he has denied it. He has denied it wholeheartedly because he said, Robert Englund is Freddy. I want nothing to do with it. But there was a rumor that David Warner was originally thought of for Freddy. And I got to tell you, the moment I heard that, I was like, ooh.
I mean, what I've read recently, and, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt until it gets further validated, is that Warner was pretty much all the way up through makeup testing for Freddy Krueger when they discovered he had a scheduling conflict and couldn't do it. And if someone were to turn up pictures from that makeup test, I would not be adverse to looking at them and going, holy shit.
Well, and it's just one of those stories where when somebody passes, you hear some interesting stories. And that's one of the most interesting ones because, again, the reaction is with all the villains he played, all these movies he was in, the characters he's played, he played Ra's al Ghul in the Batman the Animated Series. the idea that he would have been an iconic fright film character is almost too good to be true. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so box office. So it opens at $4 million. It's on 1,000 screens, which, as we've talked about on the show before, that is a lot of screens in 1982. Disney doing its huff. It opens in July 9th, 1982, and the reason, this is a funny thing that I heard about, and I couldn't believe it. The reason it opens July 9th, 1982, in the summer of 82, which is, again, as you show it all, one of the most
Crazy,
filled, insane box office summers, is because it was originally going to be released at Christmas, but Card Walker, who was chairman of the Disney board at the time, heard that The Secret of NIMH was releasing in early July. And Disney at this time hated Don Bluth. So they moved this movie up in order to basically fight out, take money away from Don Bluth. The funny thing here is they moved it into the summer that had E.T. and Star Trek and The Thing and Blade Runner and Poltergeist. And very much a perfect example of cutting off your nose to spite your face, a situation where you're trying to get one over on somebody and you end up getting over on yourself, which just stupidity.
I have to think if they had held this and maybe released it November, December in the holiday season, it might have done better at the box office, because ultimately, everybody was like so hopped up on science fiction from the whole summer. And, all those movies kind of had their moments to rise, bubble up, and go back down. And then everybody, because we're still in the grips of Star Wars mania at this point, I would have thought that.
Well, in this summer, you're in the grips of E.T. mania.
Well,
we talked about. We played for a goddamn year.
So. Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, people are still loving Star Wars. We're still waiting on the third movie. And then this new crazy, thing set inside the world of a computer in cyberspace, when we don't even have the term cyberspace yet in the public's mind. And it's not mentioned in the movie either.
Yes, the internet has not even been invented by Al Gore at this point.
I have to wonder if the movie wouldn't have done better in November, December. I have to think everybody else, rolling out of the summer would have been like, okay, what's the next sci-fi thing? Oh, it's this thing, Tron. Let's go check it out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in an effort to crush Don Bluth, which again is not the demographic of this movie, right? Oh. You're rushing it out, getting it done. I agree with you. I tend to think it would do much better. It opens $4 million, which is high for that time. It ends up grossing $33 million in the United States, $17 million overseas, so $50 million total. It is Disney's highest grossing live action film for 5 years. So it does do things. Where it's an interesting thing that I never really paid attention to before.
What dethrones it? Benji the Hunted, or all the way through to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? No, wait, that'd be 7 years.
5 years. Well, okay, wait. So 5 years. You're looking at 87. Probably Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah. No, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids though was 89. I think really the only thing they had live action was Flight of the Navigator, Benji the Hunted, and Return to Snowy River.
Maybe they're meaning 5 years before. Maybe they're meaning 77 because that would be different, right?
Yeah, that means highest since what? Return from Witch Mountain, which I can't see doing really well. Candle Shoe, Pete's Dragon.
Return from Witch Mountain, I get return. Maybe Pete's Dragon. Well, but whatever it is,
I think we're falling down a weird hole here.
It's a weird hole where we're trying to figure it out, but it does well. And this is something I never really understood or remembered, and maybe you remember it and I don't. But it did $70 million of wholesale merchandise sales. So shirts, hats, toys. I don't remember. I remember Tron toys, but I never had them.
I don't remember a lot of Tron toys. I don't think they actually had like a big line of action figures. I remember
Well, I know.
I think a friend had like the Sark figure, and that was it. But they did, and the action figures would sit. They had like a light cycle thing, and the action figures would go in there, and they had a rip.
Well, they had. I think they did have the cord. I remember that
similar
because
to
you
the
could run them.
evil toys.
Right, you could run them into the wall. Yeah,
And
no, I remember that. But
scare the hell out of your dog with
$70 million worth of merchandise, Rich?
That seems crazy to me.
That's a lot of sales. And the budget ends up being 17 million. They write off most of it. They consider it even though despite all the gross and merchandise sales, it's considered considered a disappointment by the studio. Now, the interesting thing here is it's only, and you hit on it. It's only really a disappointment because you're in the summer of '82, where everything, like some of the greatest movies in that summer are considered disappointments. Blade Runner, disappointment. The Thing, disappointment, and they all found their cult following after the fact because that summer was top heavy with huge hits. Rocky 3 we didn't do, Star Trek 2. Poltergeist, E.T. There's so many hits in that summer of '82 that you look at it and you go, "Oh my God!" Tron gets lost, and you might be right. You might be onto something. If they had just waited, oh wait, Joe's chiming in. I believe there are test photos. Joe, if you have the test, if you have the test photos of David Warner for Freddy, that's interesting. And then Can Any Two Without, Creepshow, Swamp Thing, Halloween 3, Silent Rage, First Blood, Death Wish 2, Friday the 13th. Okay, we got you. We got you, Jerry. We're not
going to get to some of them.
We're going to get to some of them. All of them. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, in my mind's eye, you always want to have a Halloween 3 Season of the Witch breakdown of what the fuck happened. Pardon my French. But, so box office for Tron isn't great, but I think that's pretty remarkably well for how different the movie is. It's an hour and 36 minutes. It feels longer. It is very high talk for if you're watching with a kid that they fix. I will say they fixed in Tron Legacy. Tron Legacy is much easier to understand and comprehend, although we're well past, the time. But then, so box office does well. Now here's the weird thing, right? Box office is okay. But the critical response, Rich, kind of astounding, right? And the critics see it for what it is. They don't judge it. They call it incoherent, right? It's not the greatest stories, but it's a marvel. It got 4 stars from Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, and they never agree on anything, Rich.
And they certainly aren't big fans of genre stuff generally.
They're usually really hard on it. The blurbs are Siskel calling it a trip and a terrifically entertaining one at that. It's a dazzler that opens up our minds to all our new tools, all in a traditional film narrative. Ebert really falls in love with it, right? Ebert, a dazzling movie from Disney, which computers are used to make themselves romantic and glamorous. Here's a technological sight and light show that is sensational and brainy, stylish, and fun. He does say at the end, though, like in the perfectly Roger Ebert way, this is almost wholly technological movie. Although it's populated by actors who are engaging, Jeff Bridges, Cindy Morgan, or sinister David Warner, it's not really a movie about human nature. So he understands. He's like Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, but so much more so the movie's a machine to dazzle and delight us. And he even put it on his Overlooked Film Festival list. He did a showing of it. It's one of the films that closed the first annual Overlooked Film Festival for Roger Ebert, because he was a champion of movies that, for whatever reason, he felt didn't get the proper desserts they deserved.
And I would argue, though, that there's there's some interesting themes going on in here. You can't quite call this empty when you're dealing with the idea of programs having like an autonomy. I mean, this is long. I think this is kind of like before the idea of, well, I mean, the idea of artificial intelligence that has existed for a long time, and been and been seen in movies, even recently as like 10 years earlier with Colossus, the Forbin Project. But I don't think they've ever really kind of dug into that. They're just not like these cold calculating things with a cold calculating intelligence. These are artificial life forms with emotional lives, interior lives. And, some believe in their creators, some don't. And, again, that raises the issue. Well, what do the users have as a responsibility towards their creation? Do they which they don't even realize they've created? I mean,
well, and that's true.
Ontologicalness on the ontologicalness of it all. There's so many weirdly fascinating things you can just peel apart.
Like it hits upon the greedy corporation before we've actually had a lot of the greedy corporation movies of the 80s, right? Like the greedy corporation is like the corporations of the 70s movies. It was right at the end of the 70s. Everybody's like, corporations are greedy. They're not good for us. We start, noticing it in films like China Syndrome and things like that. But this is one of the movies
that starts all the way back in the late 60s with something like The President's Analyst with Coburn. But
no, but but you digress.
Dives.
Yeah, we're deeper and deeper in our dives. But what I was saying, like, I think, like right around the late 70s when everybody got a little bit activist-ish, right? Where you were, like, we had movies in the 60s and 70s that theorized that corporations were evil, but, like, by the end of the 70s into the 80s, we're seeing the evil. Yeah, we know it. And China Syndrome is one of the ones that always comes to mind for me because, they shot Jack Lemmon. So anyway, I'm sorry. I digress. But like I said, the reviews are stellar. And then it also it picks up where you get this cult basis is that it starts to pick up. It starts to pick up like from the InfoWorld's Deborah Wise or somebody. It started picking up from other places where people who are in the computer industry are watching the movie. And they're like, it becomes like this wacky kind of like it hits all these different notes and hits other places where film gets reviewed in a computer magazine doesn't happen. And it does take it on the chin from some people, but for the most part the reviews are positive. Like even people who are really, really difficult, like most of their main things are, there's not a lot of love for Lisberger. The idea that he is not only is he a first-time writer and director, but he's brought all these people to the table, right? He's gotten all of these computer geeks and all of these, visual stylists and everybody, and he's brought them all together to create one uniform look. And the movie doesn't ever not look uniform. Like it doesn't, despite all these different artists coming in.
It is very cohesive and feels of a whole.
Right. And so, no, go ahead.
Okay. I think one thing that kind of helped create a more lasting audience for this movie was coming out of 1982. This was kind of drafting on two other movies that all were kind of like sort of in sync. Blade Runner, obviously, was like a very much a cyberpunk dystopian science fiction novel. But again, the idea of artificial life forms and what kind of responsibility a creator has to those life forms.
These are literally the electric sheep. And what are they dreaming about? They're dreaming about their users, whether or not they're being real.
Yeah, we're seeing that here. And both of those ideas basically kind of come together. If you take elements out of Blade Runner and elements out of Tron, you take the dystopian future and the cyber realm inside computers, combine them together, And then in 1984, you have William Gibson's groundbreaking novel, Neuromancer, which owes so much to both of these films. The other thing is the computer animated, the computer generated backgrounds and some visual effects. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the whole Genesis video is also computer generated. And so these two movies are kind of heralding
what is to come. Yeah, what's about to happen.
The industry norm. It's, they're heralding this amazing pivoting point in the history of visual effects. And the next big one will be, like I said, 1984 is The Last Starfighter. We'll see like morphing and Willow. As the 80s go on, we'll see some more.
Well, you forgot the coolest one, the obscure 1985 Night on a Stained Glass Window from Young Sherlock Holmes.
That's what this finger was for. Young Sherlock Holmes.
Sorry, I jumped you. I didn't mean to.
No,
you're taking up my material. But yeah, I mean, you also get filmmakers, like, you find out, and maybe we should. It's about that time. We're right on the cusp. It's a good time. I mean, the critical response is okay. Like, all the critical response is that it's, the most you hear is that it's just not coherent, which is, it's hard. But let's talk legacy.
Like I said, the idea that they're inside a computer and they're using all this computer jargon just seemed so foreign to people at the time that they couldn't connect to it.
Now it's quaint.
A modern audience.
Yeah, now it's
modern audience actually kind of looks at it and goes, "Oh, that's."
With how many crypto wallets we all have, and it's quaint.
Yeah, back then, I'm sure like Siskel and Ebert probably thought computers were still running on punch cards. So
well, and a lot of the movies in the 80s, they were like, you think about something like a movie that comes out like War Games, but so first off, this franchise has direct franchise viability. First off, not only is there a Tron Legacy movie that came out in 2005, it is a great sequel, not just a good sequel. It's a great sequel. It's well done. Mm-hmm. It improves on almost every aspect of the original. The script is better. The story's tighter. It's about, a kid trying to find his dad, and basically his dad getting trapped in his own creation. So there's definitely some,
more humanistic elements.
And they do a really good job. And it actually takes the AI thing a step further, because, in Tron Legacy, they introduce a living AI. She's a viable living AI that can actually walk out of the grid by the time we get to 2005. Because that's the other thing cool about the sequel, is that it's going in real time. So the movie is set itself 23 years later after the original movie. It didn't do great, but I don't care because it's really good. And it's got a Daft Punk soundtrack. It's written by this guy named Joseph Kosinski, who might have had a really good summer. He might have made like a little, like, I don't know, a movie called Maverick. He's made other movies called Oblivion that are all, like, he's ended up becoming a really good filmmaker, and it all started with his love of Tron. And other people, like other legacy things. There's a Tron Uprising TV series. It basically takes place between the two movies, between Tron and Tron Legacy. So it becomes like it's like a grid movie, right? And the viability of the franchise is still stirring, because they are building a giant monolithic roller coaster in the shadow of Space Mountain, one of the classic legacy coasters at Disney World. Right now, for Tron, a light cycle coaster that is going to open like next year. It's going to be super cool. They're still building the building. The building's huge. It's a mess. So the legacy is still there. Also, again, the things it touches on, I mentioned in our preview for tonight's show, it has hands in the Matrix. The idea of being somebody on the Matrix, if you look at Neo is very similar to the being on the grid and being in the grid in the game, playing the Matrix. And, other things that it kind of touches upon, you got, My favorite underrated show of the 90s, or that might be 2000s maybe. There's a show called Reboot. And Reboot is as cool. It's 2001, 94 to 2001. It's a Canadian TV show. It is literally Tron brought to life. And Reboot it's this wonderful animated Canadian TV show where they basically, because the users drop games in, the Reboot characters are constantly changing outfits and like living games like Mad Max or living games like all the things we grew up with. It is a cool show, and it is one of my favorite Tron clones. But the legacy is viable. I actually think we could get a third movie. I actually think we could get more out of the franchise if they wanted to go further with it, to be honest.
Yeah, we ended that second movie with that one character coming out of the computer into the real world. And I mean, it was a very beautiful moment, where she sees a sunrise for the first time and things like that. And I'm just like, I want to see a movie that maybe starts in the computer world and just shifts that dynamic. Starts in the computer world, spends most of its time in the real world, and then maybe ends back there. Just as an inversion, like I said, of the way it's normally done.
And I think one of the things about this franchise is that it's
to explore with her.
It's viable though, Rich. I think the interesting thing is, one of the things that's interesting about it is that they have not even. It appears they haven't even scratched the surface. And to some Disney fans, it's a botch franchise. But in all honesty, it is something where this new Disney regime is going to take everything they have, and they're going to scratch it till it exposes and gives us whatever it wants. Right? Yeah. This is one of the franchises that if you're somebody that has your finger on the pulse of pop culture or whatever, you want to be wherever this is when this breaks. And they finally, Tron Legacy is really good, but it's definitely not something where it hasn't had its moment yet. It hasn't, as a franchise, had its moment. Now it started to, it's one of the most, you realize, and this is something I did not know, it is one of the most rented and purchased video discs and DVDs. It's always, whenever they sell it, it always does fantastic. It's made over almost $20 million just in video rentals alone during its lifetime. And then they, when Tron Legacy came out, they released a Blu-ray. So it's still making money, even though it only cost $17 million to make. It looks like $1 million. It's one of those things where you look at it and you go, they haven't even scratched the surface of what they could do with this franchise, and it's homegrown. It's just some guy off the street that Disney looked at a test reel and said, "Yeah, we'll buy it and we'll distribute it." It's an incredible story.
I'd be interesting to see. I mean, obviously they're looking right now at if it's not going to bring us in close to $1 billion, like a Star Wars or a Marvel movie, do we even bother?
I don't think they need to do a movie. If you're asking my franchise viability total, I would say what we need is a Tron show on Disney Plus. That would be. I would. Well, I think live action would be prohibitive. We've already done animated, but while live action would be prohibitive, it would be event. It would be an event show if they gave it to somebody and they really kind of played with it. Because think of all you could do with a Tron universe with today's internet, and if you paired it with the right filmmaker and you gave them 8 episodes, a first season as a test concept to see if we could pull this off. And you could even see it do a live action reboot where people are dropping games in and you have characters running through different games. You have characters, running through the internet, like Wreck-It Ralph kind of ish stuff. You know what I mean?
You had something like WandaVision, which for the first 5 out of its 8 episodes or whatever, basically restructured its set, its entire look, its costuming, everything. So, and that's expensive. So I think you could probably do something, maybe like the reboot concept where they're constantly having to get pushed into games. But I think you could do a 6 to 8 episode Tron series, 40-minute episodes each.
And tell a story. Just tell a good story. And that's the thing. One of the things you'd have to do is if you take this franchise on, from my perspective, you're already going to have the visuals. It's already going to be better than anything that the franchise already had, right? What you have to do is you have to get somebody to lock it down and really just decide they're going to, whatever the franchise's weakness point has always been, screenplay, incoherence, all this other stuff, or theoretically that's what it is, right? So you have to have somebody come in and just kind of, I'm going to knock this down. And I'm gonna take what is a talking point and turn it into a winner. You know what I mean? And it's got to be some of the vibe. This is gonna sound silly, but the folks that did Miss Marvel show, or somebody that has a voice, but is also maybe loves the property. Somebody really loves the property, like the lady that did Obi-Wan, right? She was in love with the character from the get-go. You know what I mean? It's got to be somebody that has a love for it and has an idea that they think that they can change it and flip the criticism on its head. Oh, Tron's always been incoherent. Well, this one isn't incoherent. This one's, now it's got the visuals and it's sleek and it's modified, and it's got to be something like that. And if they did it, they would, the funny thing about it is, I read the $70 million for merchandising. This franchise lends itself to T-shirts and dressing up like the characters and all, being on the grid and having bikes. It really would be in Disney's wheelhouse. I agree with you. They probably have everything going with Star Wars and Marvel and everything right now. But they've got to go back to some of their original franchise, something original. Yeah. That'll appease some of the inmates in the asylum at Disney Plus who are complaining that everything's bought and paid for and brought in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody would be Pete Docter would be interesting. Or Brad Bird.
Yeah, so some of the Pixar guys actually feels like a perfect fit there. I mean, but to touch on the merchandising stuff, if you go online right now, you can find any number of places that are selling bootleg Flynn's Arcade T-shirts. And, obviously enough people are buying them that, these bootleggers are still selling them. And if you're not, if Disney doesn't want to, it feels that's not worth, keeping that money off the table, then I think they're out of their mind.
Is there any arcade in movies or TV that you want to be at more? Can you think of it by name?
By name?
That's what Flynn's, man. Flynn's. The Magic Quarter and Tron Legacy. But yeah, I think
every time I watch the Flynn's arcade scene, I do get kind of sort of transported back to the Spaceport arcade at the Harrisburg Colonial Park Mall from my youth, from when the year when I saw this. It has that same kind of vibe to it, and I'm just yeah, this is what arcades were at a certain time.
Joe says he sent us some pictures, so we'll see if he doesn't have the real. That's pictures about David Warner playing Freddy. Oh my god. Tron Uprising 2012 cartoon series. Never knew it existed. It's good though, Ken. It's good. So is Legacy. I don't know if you Ken, you watch the show. I don't know if you've seen Legacy. I'd really recommend Legacy. Legacy is actually a vast improvement on everything that is theoretically wrong with Tron that I don't necessarily agree with is wrong. But the franchise Viability is amazing. And the Legacy, the Matrix. Toy Story doesn't exist without Tron. Point blank. Lasseter has said, I don't know that we ever would have thought about making CGI movies. So no Tron, no Toy Story. Matrix, something as simple as the Matrix, something as just the idea of being stuck in a constructed world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many things where you look at it and you go, that was from this, and this movie led it to. It's an incredible.
It's a cornerstone. It's a cornerstone,
and it changed visual effects as we know them. You know what I mean? It's a special movie, and when you look at it, you look at all the different things that's happened with it. Even in Darkest Days, Tron has been something. Even when it's a punching bag, it's one of the top, usually one of the top rated cult films. It's always in and around the top 20. You know what I mean? And it's inspired so many things where you just look at it and you go, you don't know that Tron has inspired it, but it has. And right, I had the Intellivision game when I was a kid, so it's like I used to, the funny thing is in the Tron game, you had to pick whatever. There are harder games and easier games to win. Discs of Tron was much harder than winning the light cycle race. So you try to win as many as you could on your first quarter. It was a bitch, Rich. It was a bitch.
I'm realizing that last week I promised 2 northeastern Pennsylvania connections to Tron, and we only did 1 so far.
So let's do the other one.
The other one is Crom, the not Conan's God, but the program that Flynn finds himself fighting on the disc game when he's first on the game grid. That character is played by Peter Jurisic, who had his parents used to live in this area, and he lived with them for a short time outside of Hazleton, again south of Wilkesburg, and before he kind of packed up a battered old milk truck and drove it to New York City to get into acting. And I've actually met Peter Jurisic's parents when I was working in retail in the area.
And there you go.
They were wonderful, warm people. Very nice. And
I think that is a perfect way to end the show tonight. I think when you look at it and you go, we've connected Tron to Northeast PA in 2 ways. We've told you about its legacy. We told you how important it is. And we gave you a brief history of how it was made and how it was done. We hope you enjoy the show. Now, before we go, a couple things. First off, where can people find stuff for you, Rich Drees?
They can find me at FILMBUFFonline.com, which has all my reviews and feature writing, news reportage, news commentary sometimes as well, and also has a link to the other podcast that I do, the Big Picture podcast with my co-host Natasha Bogutsky. We've been on a hiatus for the last couple of weeks as we've been preparing to shoot a short film, which we're going to do Friday night, overnight. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be fun.
It should be fun.
Find all of that stuff at filmbuffonline.com. You can also find me on Twitter at filmbuffrich.
Okay, so I changed all my stuff. So Instagram, I am JW the Movie Guy. Twitter, I am JW the Movie Guy. Facebook, I now am JW the Movie Guy, which is my page. I also have the Loud Nerdy group, which is also super popular. And then the only other question I have for you, Rich, is do you have any idea what we're doing next week? Because that's my question is, have you ever understood the concept, Rich, that is soundtracks and how important they are to the film going experience? Because if you haven't, I would say love needs to lift you up where you belong.
I was gonna go, I don't know, but I think next week's movie is going to definitely lift us up where we belong.
Oh yeah, exactly. But yeah, so next week it was a much better segue on your part. Next week we're gonna do first off, July is packed. There's a lot of good things in July. We have a lot of things left in July, but next week we are going to do the super classic. It's one of the greatest tearjerker / romantic dramas, I'd say, in the last 40 years. Like it's up there. It's a great movie. It's got Oscar nominated. It really is. And it is one of the first movies that jumps at the chance to actually, the soundtrack is almost as important as the movie. The movie is great, but the soundtrack powers the movie into the stratosphere with regards to how it's played. So on Officer and a Gentleman next week, we get a little bit away from our genre, but we promise we'll be back to the genre because there's so many things left in July and August.
I like taking steps outside of the regular stuff in the genre. So
yeah, no, and this is this is not only first off, it's a great film. That's without a shadow of a doubt. It has some of the best performances. Deborah Winger, if you haven't actually gone back in your life and ever watched a bunch of Deborah Winger movies, she's one of the most quirky, amazing actresses of the 80s. Where if you watch her movies, like there is a rawness to her movies that are just, she's just great in a lot of stuff,
yes.
like Terms of Endearment, this, even the movies made that were kind of weird, she makes great movies, and she tends to make she makes really heartfelt choices. And the soundtrack is fantastic. Gear is amazing, and let's not forget. I want to point this out. It has an Oscar-nominated winning performance from Louis Gossett Jr., which is amazing. So Ken writes, "Legacy was better." Yes, that's fine. It's acceptable. It's one of the rare sequels that's better. And then Ken also writes, if I go for movies, Ready Player One stops for me. Ready Player One's great. Book is better. Ready Player One book is better than the movie, although I really like the Spielberg adaptation in that it's kind of like it sticks everything to the wall. So you're going to keep your mouth shut on this one? Or are you yawning?
Your mileage may vary, but it did not. Ready Player One did not work for me at all. But if you
I
found
understand. But the book, I think part of the problem is
ready for you. Real. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm happy that you found stuff to enjoy in it. That's all.
Yeah, well, it had Chucky. I was happy. Anytime Chucky gets a little play. But thank you for joining us tonight. Oh, before we go, I do have one other thing. Hold on. I do have one other thing because I want to make sure we do our job promoting stuff. So, and people are always so nice. People are so nice taking care of us with regards to and how we get. I think that's my computer. What are you gonna do? You work here, Rich. I'm doing work. I'm doing work.
The folks at Indie Network, whether you're watching them on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the other ways that I'm not remembering right now.
Yeah, so many ways.
Like them, subscribe, follow, do whatever that social platform.
Wait, I got it though. Hold on. This is one of the kids that's doing a really good job. Brandon Brooks comes on every Friday night, or tries to come on every Friday night. He has production designer Mick Strong coming on, who did Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Blade, Candyman. So Brandon does a really cool deep dive with these filmmakers and artists. He's had Oliver Gruner on recently. He had Jeremy London on. He does a really good deep dive. I may also be appearing on the show with him. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe to ask a question or whatnot, because Mick is going to Phantasm. I am also going to Phantasm. So if you like the show and you want to meet me at Phantasm, I will be there probably Friday and a little bit of Saturday because I have to catch a boat on Sunday. Phantasm is in Orlando. Hold on. Jesus, I'm bringing it up, and I did the other thing. Leave me alone. I got random stuff out there. Damn you, Rich.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, I have it. I just don't have it. So Phantasm is in Orlando. There are lots of guests coming this year. It's a haunt and horror convention. It's August 19th to the 21st. They're gonna have Tyler Mane, Shawnee Smith. Oh, she just got added. Eugene Clark, who's in the Land of the Dead. They have a lot of the characters from Fear. Oh, Jack O'Halloran just got added too, who is Non. Jesus, I'm gonna have to meet him. Yep. Non, and they have a bunch of Michael Myers coming. it's a really cool haunted festival. And I'm going to be joining Joe Friday night and Saturday for a panel. And it's going to be really cool. It is, where the hell is it at? Hold on. It is, no, that's not what I was looking for. Hee hee. It's at the entrance to Universal Orlando. It's Doubletree Hilton. So it's basically right there. And so if you're coming down for like to get ready, get in the mood for whatever, it's right near Universal. And it's going to be a good time. We're doing a panel for Harlow's Haunts, which is a movie that's coming out that's locally made down here in Florida. And there's going to be a lot of people at the convention. Shawnee Smith, I just realized, and Jack O'Halloran just got added. And I, with the newfangled Indie Escape Network press credentials, I can ask to interview them. So who knows? We might have some guest stuffs coming up in the future. But thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you all. Yes. We're having a blast. Officer and a Gentleman next week. Have a great week. Go watch a movie. Really, if you like movies, Last Movie Stars cannot be talked about less. It's so good that you just you watch it and you just get moderately obsessed with Paul Newman. Good night, Ken. Thank you for joining us. I don't know if an Officer or Gentleman is your speed next week, Ken, but tune in. It's a great movie. It deserves it. Like, one of the reasons we're doing the show is that we're trying to encompass all movies. So, like, not just genre stuff, but we like everything. So